welcome to our study tonight in Revelation 13 and 14, if we can get to 14, because there's a whole bunch of stuff packed in Revelation 13. So, and maybe we should review a little bit. What we studied the other night, we studied the fall of Satan. Revelation chapter 12, remember that?
Yes.
And what that is, that sets us up and uncovers the tactic of what Lucifer does, of what Satan does in his deception and to deceive and to war against God and his people. And that's what he does, of course, here against the woman. But the earth swallows up the water, the flood that's poured out before him, from him, I should say, and he deceives. He's a deceiver. But early in this stage, there was coercion, force, obedience, and that's what Satan does. Forces people to obey, and that's not very Christ-like. And Christ gives the option, come to Jesus or don't come to Jesus. Anyway, we see here, remember in verse 14, Revelation chapter 12 and verse 14, but the woman was given 2 wings as a great eagle, that she might flee into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time, times, and a half a time. And we've talked about that before as being 1,260 years, prophetic days, or 1,260 years.
Yes.
But this is saying it would be for a time, times, and a half a time in the presence of the serpent, from the presence of the serpent. And that's the same time frame. So we have 3 signals or indications in Scripture from the book of Daniel, and even here in Revelation. 1,260, times and a half a times, and 42 months. So we saw that here, and let's see, I think we see it over here, if I can find it real quick. Probably not, because I'm getting old. No, this is 3.5 days here, the wilderness. Yeah, and that's 42 months. Yeah, and here it is here. So in verse 3 of chapter 11, in verse 2 of chapter 11, it talks about 42 months. In verse 3 of chapter 11, it says 1,260 days. And then over here in verse 11, it says 3.5 days, which would be 3.5 years. Okay? And then we come over to chapter 12, and we see that it's for 1,200 times and a half a time. And then we go on. So are there any questions here in chapter 12? Pretty solid. Satan's rebellion and his warfare against God and God's people. And that should be clearly understood and clearly understood. So then we come down here to chapter 13, and we're starting here in verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a great beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And remember, the number 7 is symbolic of completeness. Yeah. So this is complete evil. It's coming up out of the sea, complete evil. 10 is a number for government, or worldwide, And the 10 commandments are made for who? All mankind. See, 10. 10 horns on his heads, a blasphemous name, and on his heads a blasphemous name. That's verse 1.
No, I mean 10.
Oh, the 10 is for the government. Yeah, people of the governments. So you have 10 kingdoms and 10 this and 10 that. Now these, on the horns, had 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns. So these were royal diadems, if you will. Kingdoms. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear. His mouth like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him, I think I went too far. No, his power. Now who's the dragon here?
The dragon was Satan.
It's Satan. The dragon is Satan. The great dragon, verse 9 of chapter 12, was cast out to the old serpent, also called the devil, and Satan. So the dragon gave this power that came to being in 538 AD. Remember we went over that? And it would reign for 1,260 years, times and a half a time, and 42 months. And I saw one of his heads as it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they, what does verse 4 say? So they worshiped the beast. So the issue here in chapter 13 and chapter 14, we're seeing that the issue that in this great controversy is worship. Who do we worship? We have choice. Worship God or we worship the devil. We worship what God establishes or we worship what the devil establishes. Does that make sense? So worship becomes this tie, this bind that goes together. Let's go back here to Revelation chapter 7, or not Revelation, Daniel chapter 7. Let me see. Daniel chapter 7. Let's see. A fourth beast. Yeah. This is the fourth beast. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residents with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This is the same beast we're reading here in Revelation. You can see that? I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, little one, coming up from among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out of the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. That's it right there. Yeah, you can see the horn. Maybe I can put this over there. I don't know if this is... There, that's the picture we're looking at, poster. Okay? So we come down here, and it talks about the 10 horns. It gives the explanation. And it says in verse 25, and he, this little horn, shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand. There it is again, for a time, times, and a half a time. So this is in Daniel. It's 1,260 years. So it came into being. Actually it was in existence at the time of Christ. It started smoldering and moving upward. And then at the time of the apostles, it got stronger and stronger. And then after the apostles, it got stronger and stronger. And when Constantine became a Christian, many of the pagans became Christians too, because they wanted to be like the emperor. And that makes sense. That's just human nature. And so from that came into the church a lot of false teachings, dogmatic teachings that were, inspired by Satan. And so we go on here. Let's go back here. That's what I wanted to see. That for a time, times, and a half a time. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's go back to Revelation. Maybe before we do, I just want to read this one verse in verse 26 of Daniel 8. And the vision of the evenings and mornings, which was told, is true, Gabriel says. Therefore, seal up the vision, for it refers to many days in the future. Okay? Let's go over here. Chapter 12. See if I can find it here real quick. Daniel chapter 12. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. So this is future, what we're reading here in verse 4 of Daniel, or verse 1 of Daniel chapter 12. Such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book of life. That deliverance is the second coming of Jesus. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars of the heaven. But then it says in verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book of Daniel, until when? The time of the end. Now, they studied this during the Dark Ages. People studied this. Martin Luther would study this, but he had no idea. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. But he did understand that the Church of Rome, the papacy, the Pope, was Antichrist. He understood that. And that's why he pointed his finger at him and why he left the monastery and became a reformer. His father wanted him to be an attorney. But he was walking home one day. He was born in 1483, I understand. And he was walking home one day. His dad encouraged him to be an attorney because the attorneys would have more money. And his dad was a farmer and a miner. Didn't make much money. So he wanted, put it on his son. And when he was walking home one day, there was a thunderstorm that came up, and lightning struck right near him. Boom! And he fell over, and he was terrified, and he said, "Oh, St. Anne, please deliver me. If you deliver me and protect me, I'll become a monk." And so he did. He left his studies and became a monk. He became a scholar in the Bible. He studied Romans and accepted the concept of righteousness by faith and not works. And he married a nun eventually. After he left the Catholic Church, he got married. He married was a nun. She left the Catholic Church too. But look at this. Seal up the book until the time of the end. And so that would be time of the end, maybe late 1700s, early 1700s, on down into the 1840s. And that's when they came up with the 2300 days. And, not Martin Luther, but William Miller came with the date of 1843 or 1844 that Christ would return again. And it all comes together. But we keep looking here. Let's see. How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Verse 6. Then I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters in the river. And when he held up his right hand to heaven, he swore by him who lives forever and ever, that it shall be for a time, times and a half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. And then it goes on here. Look at this. Verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and we can count that time to be in, 17 or 538. Because in 538 is when total control of the church was given to the Bishop of Rome. Okay? Total control in 538. You come down and to 1798, and we see that through the French Revolution, Napoleon particularly, captured the Bishop of Rome, the Pope of Rome, and everyone thought the Catholic Church was done. But it's interesting because during that time period, 1870, they gave authority to the Pope and said he was infallible. They didn't say that before, but they did then. So during that time when they were not powerful, they did all these things. In 1893, Pope Leo XII, I think it was, made a statement, wrote a letter to the churches and to the Catholic Church, and said, God has made the popes on earth to be God on earth. And that's just crazy. But that was 1893. And the church hadn't received its power yet. Okay? So then we come back here, and we see what would happen. Revelation 13. Did we read verse 5 yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, let's go to verse 5. So they worship the beast and the dragon, is verse 4. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who is able to make war with him? Well, Christ makes war with him. And that came about throughout the years. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. And there we are again, 1,260 days, or 1,260 years. So from 538, you come down 1,260 years. What year does it bring you to? That's right, 1798. And what?
The French Revolution.
The French Revolution, exactly. And that's when Napoleon went in, took Pope Pius, I think it was Pius VI, took him captive, and he died in exile. They didn't kill him, but he died in exile. But immediately the church leaders, we need another pope, and they continued on. It didn't die, even though it was persecuted during the French Revolution. Okay, Authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience of the saints. Now we're going to see that phrase again. Here is the patience of the saints. So this beast that comes up out of the earth is Roman Catholicism, the Roman Church. And we can see that over here. Wait a minute. In chapter 17, in verse 15. Revelation 17, verse 15. Is that a car out there? Or is that the furnace?
I think it's the furnace.
Okay. Verse 15 of chapter 17. The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Here's an interpretation of what the symbolism of water is. What is it? People, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Okay? So we come back now to chapter 13, and we're starting now in verse 11. We see that the Pope was taken captive, and people thought the papal power was done and done away with. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Now this is a beast that's not mentioned in the book of Daniel. But it has lamb-like qualities. But it, chapter 13. Chapter 13 and verse 11. Okay? 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. So he has these 2 competing attitudes. One is harsh like a dragon, another one is so soft like a lamb. And that would be deceiving to people. So, we go on. Let's move on here. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast. Well, who's the first beast? The Roman Catholic Church. That's mentioned here in Revelation. The beast comes up out of the water. It's the Roman Catholic Church. And again, I must emphasize, I like Catholics, good people. God blesses them. A lot of Catholics are going to be in heaven. More Catholics in heaven probably than Adventists. I'm sure of it. You know.
Some of them are very devout.
Yeah, absolutely, and God understands that. So this beast that comes up, he comes up out of the earth. Now that's key. Why isn't it the water? Because it comes up in a place that's not inhabited, that's not developed, that has no real industry. It just comes up out of the earth. And that's the significance. The water is peoples, nations, tongues, and peoples, around the world. But this is the earth. He exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. Now this is future. This is prophecy we're talking about. That's in the future, not happening today. Although there are probably places in the country that does happen. But the first beast, keep in mind, is this little horn power that speaks blasphemy against God. It would lose its power in 1798. But it's been regaining its power since then, but it really got a push through gaining the power in 1927. I think it's called the Lateran Peace Treaty, Lateran Treaty. And that was a thought that Mussolini had when Mussolini came to power in Italy. He wanted the power and the backing of the Catholic Church. So what he did, he gave the Catholic Church 68 acres that today is known as the Vatican. And it's the smallest nation in the world. They have their own police force, they have their own stamps. During World War II, the Germans didn't enter it. They wanted the Jews, and there's some Jews that kept, were protected there in the Vatican. But Mussolini wanted that power that the Catholic Church would give him. So he gave more power to the Catholic Church. So since 1927, their power and influence has grown phenomenally. When we,
Never heard that.
what?
That Mussolini is the, why, okay.
Yeah, Mussolini was the one that signed it over. And it's interesting because when you go back to the 1930s and 1940s and you see movies,
I love
I love them too. You know, The Bells of St. Mary, and what's another one? Another one. Bing Crosby starred in them.
Yes.
You know, he was a priest. But it was the Catholic Church that was emulated as being the powerful entity. And they got a lot of influence on that, you know. Yeah, there's other movies like that. Anyway, it was just how Catholicism was working its way in through multimedia. Will we go on? Any questions? I'm sorry? No? Okay. Verse 13. He performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down from heaven. Now that's not happening now, but it will happen. Somehow this will happen on the earth. And this is taking it from Elijah. 1 Kings chapter 11. The Mount Carmel experience when Elijah called fire down from heaven. I was reading the other day that Ahab sent a commander of 50 soldiers to go and get Ahab. This is after Mount Carmel. And when they came to get Ahab to bring him back, or get Elijah to bring him back to Ahab, Ahab said to them, "There's going to fire come down from heaven and it's going to consume you." And fire came down and consumed the first, 51 people. Well, Ahab heard about it and he said, "I'm going to send another 50 and 50 with 50 people, another commander with 50 people." And they went down and said, "Come on, Elijah wants to see you." And Ahab said, "Fire's going to come down," and consumed them. A third group of people went from Ahab, and they came and said, "Oh, Elijah, our master is asking you to come. We know what you've done to group 1 and group 2. Please don't let that happen to us." And Ahab said, "Okay, I won't." It's amazing. What a story. This is chapter 2 or 3, I think, of 1 Kings, or 2 Kings. Anyway, so we go on here. Look at this in verse 14. "And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which are granted to do all these, all in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed." So this is a death penalty that's coming up here pretty soon. We should mention that this second beast that comes up out of the land, not the water, the second beast that comes up is none other than the United States of America. Now most people don't see that. They say it's a beast that's coming up or something in the future. But it's already here. And if you look back on our history as Americans, we had a very lamb-like attitude at the beginning. But did you know in Boston, when Irish people were coming over, Catholics, the Protestants in Boston actually burnt down, about 1830, burnt down their seminary for girls, school for girls. That's not very nice. In 1850, when they were building a monument to Washington, in Washington, D.C., it's the Washington Monument, they, the townspeople of Washington, staunch Protestants, nothing to do with Catholicism, they put a big chain around that stone that the papal system, the Catholic Church, donated to build this Washington Monument. They didn't want anything to do with Catholic. They took it and dumped it into the Potomac Ocean, or Potomac River. And in 1950, there was a call to send an ambassador to Rome, to the Pope of Rome. And the U.S. Senate at that time said, "No, we're not going to do it." And then, was it 20 years later, 30 years later, was it, I think it was Reagan, President Reagan, I was alive at the time, he authorized to have a ambassador sent to Rome, and there's one there today. So we can see how the Catholic Church has moved forward in its power. And don't be surprised at all the apparent confusion that's going on in the world today, because Catholicism will use it to their advantage. Because one of the goals of Catholicism, the papacy, is to have control over the whole world again, as they did back in the 14, 13 dark ages. So, it's coming. It's coming.
I read in the website the other day, I wanna check again, already gone, like, all, Catholic
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
get together in New York or something like
Yeah.
that. Do you know about that?
No, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I tried to find again, but that's already gone.
Well, that's okay. It doesn't surprise me at all.
I want to know, the tale, what was going on there.
Yeah, a few years ago they were gonna put in a new bishop in the Lutheran Church, establish that person as the head of their diocese of the Lutheran Church, and they held that service in a Catholic cathedral up in Wisconsin. And the presiding person was the bishop of the Wisconsin Diocese of Catholicism. And yet it was a Lutheran church. So even there, people are putting down they're lowering their guard. There was a big, back in in about 2016 or 15 or something like that, there was one of these charismatic preachers, and I can't remember his name. He has an airplane, he's well known, very rich. He had a conference of the charismatic church, or the evangelicals. They all came down to Texas, big, thousands of people in this, and he said, it's time we put the Reformation behind us and reach our hands and then grasp the hands of Catholicism, and we work together. That happened. We're in the end of time. This is exciting, I think. My camera here is going to bow out here in just a few minutes, so if it does, I'll keep my eye on it, and we'll just keep the thing plugged in to the electrical, and hopefully it'll work. Okay, so we come down here. Verse 14, he deceives those who dwell on the earth. This system is a deceptive system. They lie. Okay? He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. This is a death penalty. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. What's the significance about their forehead? In their mind. They're convinced. On the hand, it means that they're just going along with it because they don't want to be killed. But their heart is still saying, I don't want to follow God. I still want to do my own thing. Look back here at Exodus chapter 6. I'm sorry, Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Now I'm still recording. And look at this. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see. This is an excellent chapter. I'm in chapter 4. No wonder I can't find it. Chapter 6. We look at it verse, let's see. We look at verse, chapter 6. Okay, let's look at verse 1, chapter 6, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1, 2, and 3. And now this is the commandment, and these are the statutes and judgments which the Lord your God has commanded to teach you, that you may observe them in the land which you are crossing over to possess, that you may fear the Lord, to keep his statutes and his commandments which I command you, you and your sons and your grandson, all the days of your life. That's still coming. All the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Therefore, hear, O Israel, be careful to observe it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord your God of your fathers has promised you, a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay? So he's saying these commandments. And what's in the middle of the commandments, of the 10 Commandments? The Sabbath, the 4th commandment. In ancient times, when they did commandments, they would write the most important, they would give the title of the leader, of the king that's being submitted to, in the center of the covenant, of the promise. And the Ten Commandments is the covenant, and in the middle of that is the promise in our hearts that we will follow him. It's his commandments. Okay? Any questions? There's something else here I want to share. I think it's here. Because it even says that the Sabbath is the seal of God. It's the sign of God. It's always the way, isn't it? Anyway, it is here. Now, when we see the concept of the fear of the Lord, we need to understand that that fear is respect. It's not a fear of punishment or anything like that. It's a fear of acknowledgement. It's a fear of love. And that's how God brings it together. Let's go over here. Let's go over here to the book of Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23. And we're looking at verse 1 and 2. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, The feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. And the very first one is the Sabbath. Verse 3. 6 days you shall work, be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. So that's perpetual. The Sabbath will be perpetual. The Sabbath is talked about in the new earth, in Isaiah, that we will keep the Sabbath. From one Sabbath to another, all people, all flesh will come to worship God. Any questions?
Isaiah 66.
I think it's Isaiah 66, yeah.
Yeah, I talked to people so many times.
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, that's
All
Old
past.
Testament.
Right.
We not keep the Sabbath because that's Old Testament. That's
Yeah.
what they said. And I told them, check in Mark 2.
That's right.
Jesus very clear talk about Sabbath.
That's right. And
It just-
And yeah, and even in Revelation chapter 1:10, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And only one place or a couple of places in the Old Testament it says, God says, he speaks, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. And he says, this, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is my day, on my holy day. That's what he calls it. The Sabbath is my holy day. That's what God says. So it's the Lord's day. But people will follow what they want to follow. You know, well, my parents did this, my grandparents did this, and my great-great-grandparents did, and go on and on and on and on. But they don't realize that what they're following is the deception of the Roman Catholic Church. And there are some people, there's several denominations, there's some groups of people that do worship on the seventh-day Sabbath. There's Seventh-day Church of God. There's there's one or two others. Mormonism almost started keeping the Sabbath back in the 1830s, but they didn't. And wouldn't that have been confusing? You know, if they did.
Yeah,
But they didn't.
In Indonesia, they have a 7-day Sabbath,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not 7-day Adventist.
Right. Right.
You know, they
Yeah.
call 7-day Sabbath.
There's a seventh day. There's a yeah. There's an Advent. I forget the name of it. I'm getting old.
And they always performing,
Yeah.
you know, entertainment or they
Sure.
are doing that. Then
Yeah.
study the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the day group.
There's a church called the Seventh-day Church of God. And when we were first organized in the 1860s, selected our name, people wanted us to be called the Church of God. Well, we didn't do that, but there was a group that broke off and said, we'll be called the Church of God, Seventh-day Church of God. It's remarkable how all this comes together. Any other questions or comments? Okay? Okay, let's see, we read that. Mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. That's the mark of the beast, and the beast is Catholicism. And this mark is contrary to the seal of God. The seal of God is not in the hand, but it's in the forehead. Because it's in the forehead where God writes his name. And his name, God's name, is his character. And he puts it there, right in our foreheads. And we're convinced that it's true, and we're going to die by some people because of it. And that would be okay. But we're also encouraged to flee to the mountains, the Bible says so. And that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name, the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Why is 6 important? Because it doesn't quite reach 7. What day of the week was Moses, or not Moses, what day of the week was Adam created on? The 6th day. So 6 is the number of man. Remember, we go back to Daniel chapter 2 and we see this golden image. What was its height? 60 cubits. What was its breadth? 6 cubits. The number 6 is Babylon's number. Yeah, the number 6 is Babylon's number.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so this is all Babylon we're seeing talked about here. And anyway, that's Revelation chapter 13. The first beast that comes up out of the water, Roman Catholicism, 538. It loses its power and is captured. The Pope is captured in 1798. But the church continues on and gets stronger as it goes on. And in 1927, Mussolini gave the land back to the Pope, or to the Catholic Church. So now they have 68 acres there called the Vatican City. It's its own nation, smallest nation in the world. I don't think there are any Adventist churches there, though. And by the way, there are only 2 worldwide churches, only 2, that have ministries in the farthest parts of the world. The one is the Roman Catholic Church. The second one is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We go into countries that are unopened, but we're aggressive in our evangelism and sharing the gospel of truth, the gospel of God, and going right back to the Bible. But we're a worldwide church. In the 1920s, there was a conference of all evangelical Christians, and Adventists were invited there. And they were saying our ministries are overlapping each other, so let's just divide up the world and say, you take this part, you take that part, and so forth and so on. And they came to the Adventists, what part would you like to have? And the Adventists said, we'll take it all. I love it. And that's the attitude we need to have. God's blessed us with such a rich, rich message that it's overwhelming at times. Okay, so anyway, we're here at about 10 after 7. Do we want to keep going, or do we want to finish up next Monday? We'll do 14 next Monday.
Yeah, because maybe there'll be more people here for 14.
I hope so. But if not, that's okay. That's okay. This is a book that I got,
Oh, okay.
and this is what I'm using. He has a big commentary on the book of Revelation too, and I don't know if I'm in full agreement with it. Everything. Ranko Stefanik.
It's Adventist.
Yeah.
of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Stefanik, Russian name, huh? It probably is. Okay, yeah, we'll quit out tonight. You can probably buy it through the Adventist Book Center,
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
so if you want it. Good stuff. Okay, again, this is the book I'm referring to. Okay. Very good.
Do we have ABC here, Pastor, for Seventh-day Adventist group?
A what?
It's Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, Topeka.
Yeah. About a 2-hour drive from here, isn't it?
They're very
But we can
nice.
order.
Oh, yeah. You can just call them and they'll.
Yeah, and they have it online.